The grand hall of the Galactic Concord buzzed with whispers. 12 alien counselors sat on raised platforms, looking down at the single human woman who stood tall, despite the heavy gravity settings they had adjusted to make her uncomfortable. Dr. Alara Reed kept her shoulders back and her head high. Her dark hair was pulled into a practical braid, and her green eyes scanned the room without fear. "Silence," called out High Counselor Vextara, his blue skin rippling with patterns that showed his annoyance. "This council will now pass judgment on the human, Dr. Alara Reed." Alara fought the urge to roll her eyes. After 3 weeks of what they called a trial, she knew exactly what was coming. She had dared to speak out against the Concord's mining, operations on planets with developing life forms. She had shown proof that they were breaking their own laws, and now they would make her pay for it. "Dr. Reed," continued Vextara, his voice echoing in the large chamber, "you have been found guilty of spreading false information about Concord operations, interfering with authorized resource collection, and showing disrespect to this council." "False information?" Alara couldn't help herself. "I showed you the evidence. Your mining ships are killing native life forms on Proxima B. There are children dying because—" "Silence!" Vextara slammed his 3-fingered hand down. "This behavior is exactly why humans remain a problem species. You evolved on a harsh world that should have killed you, and it left you aggressive and disrespectful." The Zephyrian counselor, a thin being with skin like fine paper, leaned forward. "Perhaps we should remember that Dr. Reed is a respected xenobiologist. Her home, World Earth, is classified as a Class 4 Deathworld. She does not understand the gentle ways of civilized space." Several counselors nodded in agreement. To them, humans were a strange species, tough, adaptable, but dangerously unpredictable. They had evolved on a planet with wildly changing seasons, dangerous predators, natural disasters, and diseases. What the council called a death world, humans simply called home. "We have decided on your punishment," said Vextara. "You will be exiled to Tartarus 9. A shocked murmur ran through the watching crowd. Even Alara raised her eyebrows in surprise. Tartarus 9 was legendary, the most extreme death world ever discovered. No Concord species had ever survived more than 3 days there. "You will be provided with basic survival equipment as our laws require," continued Vextara, "and transported to the surface. This punishment fits your crimes against the peaceful operation of the Concord." Alara looked at the faces of the council members. Some showed satisfaction, others discomfort. None showed mercy. They were all from species that had evolved on gentle, beautiful worlds with perfect weather and few natural threats. They had never understood humans. Then Alara did something that disturbed every alien in the room. She laughed. It was not a sound of madness or fear. It was genuine amusement. "Tartarus 9, she said, still chuckling. "You're sending me to a planet with high gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperatures, and aggressive wildlife?" She shook her head. "You realize I grew up in the Australian outback, right? This just sounds like a camping trip with extra steps." The counselors shifted uncomfortably. This was not the reaction they expected from someone who had just received a death sentence. "You think because your species can't survive there, no one can," Alara continued. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that got us here in the first place. You don't understand other worlds or other beings. You only understand your own comfort." 2 security guards moved toward her, their exosuits whirring as they approached. "You have 1 day to prepare," said Vextara coldly. "Use it wisely, human." As the guards escorted her from the chamber, Alara heard the Zephyrian counselor whisper to his neighbor, "Perhaps we should have chosen a different punishment. Humans have that disturbing tendency to adapt." The neighbor, a crystalline being, from a world of perfect order, replied, "No species can adapt to Tartarus 9, not even humans." The holding cell was small but clean. Alara sat on the edge of the bed looking through the pathetic survival kit they had given her. A basic filter mask, a thermal blanket, 1 week's worth of nutrient bars, a small medical kit, and a knife. "They really want me dead," she muttered, examining the cheap filter mask. It might keep out some of the larger toxic particles in Tartarus 9's atmosphere, but not much else. The door slid open, and a human man in a Concorde uniform entered. Captain Marcus Chen looked uncomfortable as he surveyed the meager supplies. "I've brought you something," he said quietly, looking over his shoulder to make sure no one was watching. He placed a small package on the bed. "It's not much, just some real water purification tablets, a better knife, and some adaptive fabric that can handle the acid rains. It's all I could smuggle in." Ilara looked up at him. "Won't you get in trouble?" Marcus shrugged. "Probably, but I'm tired of watching the Conquered toss humans away like we're disposable." He lowered his voice. "There are rumors, Ilara. Rumors that some exiles survive. On Tartarus 9, that's impossible." "Is it?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "They never send anyone to check. They just assume everyone dies. But humans..." He smiled, slightly. "We're good at surviving things we shouldn't." Ilara tucked the package into her kit. "Thank you." Marcus nodded. "The dropships are automated. They'll put you down near what they think is the least deadly region, which isn't saying much. After that, you're on your own." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "You were right, about the mining operations. Everyone knows it. They're just too afraid to say it." After he left, Ilara finished packing her few supplies. Her mind was already working, planning, adapting. The counselors saw Tartarus 9 as a death sentence, but Ilara saw it differently. She saw a challenge. The next morning, guards marched her to a small hangar where a single-person drop pod waited. It looked old and poorly maintained, another sign that no one expected its passenger to survive long enough to complain. As they strapped her in, Ilara noticed a small group of humans watching from behind a security barrier. Concord workers and a few officers, including Marcus. They stood together, silent but present, a small show of solidarity from Earth's children among the stars. The pod door sealed with a hiss. Through the small viewport, Ilara watched as the hangar doors opened to the blackness of space. A mechanical voice counted down from 10. Ilara closed her eyes and thought of Earth, of wide-open skies and dangerous beauty, of a world that had shaped her species to face hardship and survive. "You picked the wrong species to underestimate," she whispered as the pod launched toward the swirling, violent atmosphere of Tartarus 9 below. The Conquered had just made their biggest mistake. They had sent a human to a Deathworld, and for a human, that was just another Tuesday. The drop pod screamed through the atmosphere of Tartarus 9, shaking violently as it descended. Inside, Ilara gripped the safety straps until her knuckles turned white. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as the heat shield struggled to protect the small craft. "Come on, hold together," she muttered as the pod jerked sideways. The external temperature gauge showed numbers far beyond what most ships could handle. The Concorde had at least built their exile pods to survive entry. They wanted their prisoners to experience the planet before dying, not burn up in the atmosphere. A deafening boom shook the pod as it broke through the lower cloud layer. Through the small viewport, Ilara caught her first glimpse of her new home. The landscape below was a nightmare of strange colors, bubbling purple marshes, forests of black twisted trees, and mountains that seemed to glow with an inner red light. "Charming place," she said to herself. "Real vacation spot." With a bone-jarring crash, the pod slammed into the soft ground of a marsh. The impact knocked Ilara's head against the restraints, and for a moment, her vision blurred. When she could see clearly again, she quickly checked the atmospheric readings. The screen displayed a list of toxic gases and deadly compounds that made up the air outside. For most conquered species, one breath would dissolve their lungs. For a human, it would be painful and uncomfortable, but survivable with the filter mask, at least for a while. Ilara felt the increased gravity immediately as she unbuckled her straps. Even simple movements required more effort. The Concorde records had said Tartarus 9's gravity was 1.3 times Earth standard. Difficult, but manageable with time to adjust. She gathered her meager supplies and checked the knife that Marcus had smuggled to her. It was far better quality than the one the Conquered had provided, carbon steel with a serrated edge that would actually cut something. Step 1. Get out of this death trap, she said, pushing the emergency release for the pod door. It swung open, with a metallic groan, letting in a rush of hot, sulfur-scented air. Ilara pulled on her filter mask and took a careful breath. The air burned slightly in her lungs, but the mask filtered out the worst of it. She stepped out onto the surface of Tartarus 9. The ground beneath her boots was spongy and wet, covered in a moss-like growth that glowed faintly blue where her feet compressed it. All around her, strange plants with razor-sharp leaves swayed, despite the absence of wind. The dual suns of the system beat down mercilessly, their ultraviolet radiation harsh enough to cause severe burns within minutes to unprotected skin. Ilara pulled the thermal blanket from her pack and draped it over her head and shoulders. It wasn't much, but it would provide some protection from the radiation while she found better shelter. The pod had landed near the edge of the marsh, with firmer ground and a cluster of rock formations visible about half a kilometer away. Ilara decided that would be her first destination. As she took her first steps, the increased gravity made her movements slower and more deliberate. Each step required conscious effort. "Gravity's a pain," she grunted. "But nothing I can't handle with time." Halfway to the rocks, a loud splashing sound came from behind her. Ilara turned quickly to see a large bubble rise and burst in the purple marsh where her pod had landed. The craft was slowly sinking into what appeared to be quicksand or some kind of natural acid bog. Within minutes, the expensive Conquered technology would be gone. "So much for calling for help," she said with a grim smile. Not that she had expected the Conquered to include any communication devices in an exile pod. The rock formation turned out to be better than she had hoped. Several large stones leaned against each other, creating a natural shelter underneath. Ilara swept away the strange, crawling insects that had made homes in the crevices and set up her small camp. The rocks would provide protection from the radiation and a defensible position for the coming night. From her higher vantage point, she could now see more of the landscape. The marsh stretched for kilometers to the east, while a forest of those strange black trees grew densely to the west. In the far distance, the red glowing mountains formed a jagged line across the horizon. The air shimmered with heat and toxic gases, creating a hazy, dreamlike quality to everything. Ilara pulled out her supplies and carefully organized them. The nutrient bars would last a week if she rationed them carefully. By then, she would need to find edible native food sources or starve. As the first sun began to set, the temperature dropped rapidly. Ilara was grateful for the thermal blanket as the comfortable heat of day quickly turned to bitter cold. Then, as darkness fell, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The landscape around her began to glow. Plants that had seemed harmless in daylight now pulsed with bioluminescent light. The marsh waters sparkled with moving lights, creatures swimming beneath the surface. But most disturbing were the shadows that moved between the trees at the edge of the forest. Large shapes that glowed with patterns of light like walking constellations. Strange calls echoed across the marsh, sounds no human had ever heard before. Hunting calls, Ilara realized. Predators were emerging for their nightly hunt. From her shelter among the rocks, Ilara watched intently, taking mental notes of everything she saw. She didn't panic or cower. Instead, she studied the movements of the creatures, looking for patterns and behaviors she could understand. When a large serpentine creature with glowing frills along its spine slithered too close to her shelter, Ilara noticed how it moved. Its hunting pattern reminded her of Earth's Komodo dragons, patient, methodical, and reliant on ambush. She struck the rocks near her with her knife, creating a sharp, rapid series of clicks. The creature froze, then quickly retreated. The sound had confused or startled it, a weakness Ilara filed away for future reference. "First rule of survival," she whispered as she reinforced her shelter with sharp stones and positioned the knife where she could grab it quickly. "Understand what's trying to kill you before it gets the chance." As the second sun finally set, plunging the world into a darkness broken only by the eerie bioluminescence, Ilara settled in for her first night on Tartarus 9. She was cold, surrounded by deadly predators on a toxic planet millions of light years from Earth, but she was alive, and she intended to stay that way. "Some death world this is," she said with a small smile as she watched the glowing predators prowl. "I've had worse camping trips. For a human raised on Earth, the original death world as far as the galaxy was concerned, this was just another challenge to overcome. Another Tuesday in a lifetime of surviving where others couldn't." 2 weeks had passed since Ilara's arrival on Tartarus 9. The Conquered Council would have been shocked to know she was not only alive, but beginning to thrive. Her small rock shelter had evolved into a more permanent structure. She had woven tough fibers from the razor leaf plants into screens that filtered the worst of the toxic air. She had created tools from the crystalline bones of a predator that had made the mistake of seeing her as prey. Most importantly, she had begun to understand the rhythms of this deadly world. The morning routine had become familiar. Check the perimeter for night predators, collect the water that condensed on certain leaves overnight, and prepare for the day's exploration. Ilara had carefully mapped a 5-kilometer radius around her camp, marking dangerous areas and valuable resources. Today she planned to venture farther than before. She had noticed something strange 3 days ago, a perfectly straight line of stones on top of a distant ridge. Nature didn't make straight lines. Someone or something had placed those stones deliberately. Ilara packed her makeshift backpack with water, 2 of her remaining nutrient bars, and her collection of weapons: the knife from Marcus, a spear made from a predator's tooth, and a sling for launching the small explosive seed pods she had discovered. The journey to the ridge took most of the morning. The high gravity still made every step an effort, but Ilara's muscles had begun to adapt. She moved more easily now, her body growing stronger by necessity. As she climbed the ridge, Ilara noticed more signs that she might not be alone. Small marks on trees that couldn't be natural. Plants that had been harvested with clean cuts. At the top of the ridge, she found what she was looking for: a line of stones pointing like an arrow toward a distant valley. "Someone's leaving markers," she muttered, squinting against the harsh sunlight. "Someone who wants to be found." She followed the stone arrows for another hour until she reached the edge of a deep valley. Here, the terrain changed dramatically. The toxic marsh gave way to more solid ground, and the vegetation was less aggressive. Most surprising of all was a clear path winding down into the valley. Ilara approached cautiously, all her senses alert for traps or ambushes. Halfway down the path, she froze. A sound carried on the wind, impossible but unmistakable. Human laughter. Moving more quickly now, Ilara rounded a bend in the path and stopped in amazement. Before her was a settlement built into the side of the valley. Structures made of local materials formed a small village with gardens of adapted plants, water collection systems, and defensive walls. And moving among these structures were people, mostly humans, but also a few beings that appeared to be half-human hybrids. Before Ilara could approach further, 3 figures appeared on the path ahead of her. They carried weapons, but held them, casually, not pointed at her. They wore clothing made from local materials and had the lean, tough look of people who had survived impossible conditions. "Welcome to Tartarus Settlement," said the leader, a tall man with dark skin marked by faint luminescent patterns, adaptations to the planet's environment. "I'm Commander Javier Torres, former Conquered tactical officer, exiled 5 years ago, for the same reason as you, Dr. Reed." Ilara stared in shock. "How do you know my name?" Torres smiled. "We have our ways of getting information. The Conquered thinks they're throwing troublemakers away, but they're really just sending us reinforcements, especially when they send us someone with your skills." He gestured toward the settlement. "Come, you must have questions. We have food, clean water, and better shelter than those rocks you've been sleeping on." The main building of the settlement was a large cave that had been expanded and reinforced. Inside, about 50 people gathered around tables made from the black wood of the forest trees. The air here was filtered and almost pleasant to breathe. The Concord has been sending their problems here for decades, Torres explained as he showed Alara around. They think they're disposing of us. They never bother to check if anyone survived because they couldn't imagine anything could. A woman with Asian features and arms covered in faint scales, another adaptation, handed Alara a cup of steaming liquid. Real tea, she said with a smile. We've adapted earth plants to grow here. I'm Dr. Lin Chen, former Concord botanical engineer. How? Alara asked, looking around at the thriving community. How is this possible? This planet should be uninhabitable. Torres led her to a table where a rough map was spread out. That's what makes this place special. Tartarus 9 isn't just any Deathworld, it's a testing ground. He pointed to a location marked with a circle. At the center of the planet is something the first settlers called the evolution engine, ancient technology from a species long gone. Doctor, Chen continued, the planet's extreme conditions aren't natural, they're engineered. The precursor species who built this place designed it as an evolutionary accelerator. The planet doesn't just challenge life, it forces rapid adaptation. And guess which species in the galaxy is best at adapting? Torres grinned. The Concord's biggest mistake was sending humans to the one place where our greatest strength gets amplified. Alara sat down, trying to process what she was hearing. You're saying this planet is making us evolve? Changing us? See for yourself. Torres held out his arm in a beam of sunlight. His skin shimmered with faint patterns that seemed to absorb the radiation. Those of us who've been here the longest show the most changes. Denser bones for the gravity, better lungs for the atmosphere, even limited bioluminescence for the dark seasons. The changes are manageable and beneficial, Dr. Chen added, and they seem to happen faster with each generation. She nodded toward a group of young people. The children born here adapt even more quickly. Ilara's scientific mind raced with questions. How did you find all this out? How did you build all this? The first exiles barely survived, Torres said, but they discovered the ruins of the precursor civilization and began to understand what this planet really was. Each new exile brought new skills. Eventually, we learned to tap into some of the ancient technology. He led Alara to a small room where a communications array hummed softly. We can intercept Concord transmissions. That's how we know about new exiles like you. It's also how we discovered something disturbing. Torres activated a screen showing Concord data files. The Council isn't just using Tartarus 9 as an exile planet. They're monitoring it as a controlled experiment. They're studying how different species adapt before dying. We're the first to not only survive but organize. Alara scanned the files, her anger growing. They're watching us? Like lab animals? They were, Dr. Chen said with a smile. We figured out how to feed them false data years ago. As far as they know, nothing survives here longer than a few weeks. A young man rushed into the room, his expression urgent. Commander, the readings from the engine are changing again. The instability is getting worse. Torres's face grew serious. The evolution engine has become unstable over the past month. If it collapses completely, even we won't be able to survive what happens next. He turned to Alara. We've been looking for someone with your background, xenobiology and advanced Concord technology training. We need to stabilize the engine, but it's deep within the planet, protected by defenses designed to eliminate any species deemed unworthy of evolution's gifts. And you think I can help? Alara asked. Torres nodded. I know you can. The question is, will you? This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about showing the Concord what happens when they underestimate humans. Alara looked around at the community that had made the impossible possible. People who had turned exile into opportunity. Her decision was easy. When do we start? The preparation for the journey to the evolution engine took 3 days. Alara spent this time learning everything the settlement knew about the ancient technology at the heart of Tartarus 9. The engine is located 5 kilometers below the surface, Torres explained as they studied holographic maps in the command center. The precursors built a network of tunnels and chambers to protect it. Some are filled with traps designed to test those who seek to reach the core. Dr. Chen pointed to several marked sections on the map. These are defense systems we've identified. They seem designed to eliminate species that lack certain traits: adaptability, problem-solving, cooperation. Test to see if we're worthy, Ilara said, understanding dawning. The precursors wanted successors who could handle the engine's power. Torres nodded. Exactly. And they made sure only the right kind of species could ever reach it. The team assembled for the mission included Torres, Dr. Chen, Ilara, and 4 others with specialized skills. Each carried equipment adapted for the harsh journey. Breathing filters enhanced with local materials, weapons effective against the underground predators, and tools to bypass the ancient security systems. On the morning of the 4th day, they gathered at the tunnel entrance. The opening was carved into solid rock, with strange symbols etched around its edges. No one has gone deeper than the 3rd level, Torres warned the group. Beyond that, the defenses become more creative. Stay alert and remember your training. They entered the tunnel in single file, lights mounted on their shoulders illuminating the way. The walls were smooth, made of a material harder than any metal Ilara had ever seen. As they descended, the temperature rose steadily. The engine generates enormous heat, Dr. Chen explained, wiping sweat from her brow. It's part of what powers the planet's extreme environment. The first challenge came at the end of a long corridor where the floor suddenly disappeared into a deep pit. Floating platforms hung in the air, each too far to jump to even in the lighter gravity of the tunnel system. Movement sensors, said Rivera, the team's tech specialist. She pointed to small devices embedded in the walls. They respond to problem solving. Ilara studied the setup and realized the pattern. It's a puzzle. The platforms will move if we press these panels in the right sequence. She quickly worked out the mathematical pattern and directed the team to press specific panels. The platforms shifted, forming a bridge across the chasm. Good work, Torres said as they crossed. First test passed. The second level brought different challenges, chambers where the air composition changed rapidly, becoming toxic even to their adapted lungs. They had to race through, timing their movements between breathable cycles. By the 3rd level, they encountered the first living defenders, strange mechanical biological hybrids that looked like a cross between insects and machines. The creatures attacked in swarms, forcing the team to work together, combining their weapons and tactics to drive them back. Cooperation test, gasped Malik, the combat specialist, as they sealed the chamber door behind them. They attacked whenever. We tried to act individually. The 4th level was where things became truly dangerous. No previous expedition had made it this far. The tunnels narrowed and twisted in impossible directions, defying normal physics. Gravity shifted unpredictably. Strange lights pulsed along the walls, disorienting and confusing. Perception test, Dr. Chen said, analyzing the patterns. The precursors want to see if we can adapt our senses to unusual conditions. Ilara noticed that some of the team were developing headaches and nausea from the disorienting effects. Strangely, she felt fine. Her 2 weeks directly exposed to the planet's surface had already begun changing her. She guided the others, helping them adjust their perceptions to navigate the twisted passages. After 8 hours of descent, they reached a massive door that blocked the entire tunnel. This is it, Torres said, examining the complex lock mechanism. The entrance to the engine core. No one has ever opened this door. The lock consisted of changing symbols that shifted and rearranged themselves constantly. Rivera tried to decode it but threw up her hands in frustration after an hour. It's impossible. The pattern changes too quickly. Ilara had been quietly watching the symbols. Something about them seemed familiar. They reminded her of the bioluminescent patterns on the predators she had observed during her first nights on the surface. It's not a code, she said suddenly. It's communication. The symbols are like the patterns the native life forms use to signal each other. She placed her hand on the door and focused, remembering the patterns she had seen. To everyone's amazement, her skin began to glow faintly with similar patterns, one of the adaptations beginning to manifest in her body. The door responded, the symbols matching her patterns, and slowly swung open. Beyond the door was a vast chamber that seemed to extend forever in all directions. At its center floated a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with energy, the evolution engine. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, radiating power that Alara could feel in her bones. Incredible, breathed Dr. Chen, her scientific curiosity overcoming her awe. She activated her scanning equipment, taking readings of the engine's energy output. Torres pointed to sections where the crystal structure appeared cracked and unstable. There's the problem. Parts of the engine are failing. Rivera connected her tablet to a control interface nearby. The system is incredibly complex, but I'm getting some basic readings. The engine is responding to something. It's cycling up and down in a pattern I don't understand. Ilara approached the engine carefully. As she got closer, the pulsing of the crystal seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat. She felt a strange connection to the ancient technology, as if it recognized her somehow. "It's not malfunctioning," she said slowly as understanding dawned. "It's responding exactly as it was designed to. The engine is reacting to our presence, to human presence, specifically." She turned to the others, her eyes wide with the revelation. The precursors didn't build this as just any evolutionary accelerator. They built it to find and test species worthy of inheriting their legacy. When enough humans arrived and began to adapt, it activated a new program. Torres looked skeptical. How could they possibly know about humans? They were gone long before our species even evolved. They didn't need to know about us specifically, Alara explained. They were looking for certain traits: adaptability, resilience, problem-solving intelligence, cooperation. They designed the engine to recognize those traits in whatever species might eventually find this planet. She pointed to the control interface. "We don't need to fix the engine, we need to complete the connection. It's been waiting for a species like us to reach this point." Dr. Chen's scanner beeped urgently. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it quickly. The instability is growing worse. If the engine collapses, the released energy will tear this planet apart." Ilara stepped forward and placed both hands directly on the crystal surface of the engine. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Information flooded into her mind, thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and technology. She saw the precursors' history, their rise and eventual decision to seed the galaxy with their knowledge, through places like Tartarus 9. She understood their vision, to find species that could thrive where others failed, species that grew stronger through adversity rather than avoiding it. "They were looking for successors," she whispered. "They were looking for us." The engine pulsed once brilliantly, bathing the entire chamber in light. When it faded, the cracks in the crystal had healed. The instability was gone, replaced by a steady, powerful hum. And in Ilara's mind remained the knowledge of what they had just inherited, technology and understanding beyond anything the Concord had ever imagined. "What happened?" Torres asked, staring at the now stable engine. "What did you do?" Ilara turned to the group, her eyes now showing faint luminescent patterns that matched the engine's pulse. "I accepted their gift," she said simply. "Now it's time to show the Concord what happens when you exile humans to a world that makes them stronger." The return journey from the evolution engine was much faster than the descent. The ancient defenses now recognized them as authorized users, opening pathways that had been hidden before. When they emerged back into the settlement, cheers greeted them. The stabilization of the engine had immediately improved conditions throughout Tartarus 9. In the weeks that followed, Ilara worked closely with the settlement scientists to understand the knowledge she had received from the engine. Her mind now contained blueprints for technologies the Conquered couldn't imagine. The precursors had been thousands of years more advanced than the current galactic civilization, and they had left everything to their worthy successors. 1 month after the engine expedition, Ilara called a meeting with the settlement's leadership council in the main hall. "It's time to discuss our future," she said, looking around at the assembled group. "We've stabilized the engine and gained access to incredible technology. The question is, what do we do with it?" Torres leaned forward. "The obvious answer is to build a ship and leave. Return to conquered space and clear our names. Alara shook her head. That's thinking too small. She activated a holographic display showing a map of conquered space. The conquered has thousands of worlds, millions of ships. We're just a few hundred humans on a planet everyone avoids. Exactly, Torres frowned. We don't have the numbers or resources to do anything else. But that's our advantage, Alara countered, her eyes gleaming with the faint luminescent patterns that had become more pronounced since her connection with the engine. No one's watching what happens on a Deathworld, and no one's expecting anything to come out of one either. She changed the display to show schematics for an unusual ship design. With the engine's knowledge, we can build bioorganic ships capable of surviving Tartarus 9's conditions, vessels that can navigate the same toxic atmospheric compositions that prevent conventional Concorde ships from approaching this planet. Dr. Chen studied the designs with growing excitement. These would be undetectable to Concorde scanners. They'd read as natural phenomena, not technology. Exactly, Alara nodded. And we wouldn't be alone. The Concorde has been exiling troublemakers to various Deathworlds for centuries. There are at least 11 other planets like Tartarus 9, each with an evolution engine designed by the precursors. This revelation caused a stir among the council members. How do you know this? Asked Torres. The engine showed me, Alara replied, simply. The precursors built a network of testing grounds across the galaxy. Each engine is connected to the others. Some may have survivors like us, people who found ways to adapt and survive. Rivera, the tech specialist, grinned widely. You're proposing a rescue mission, a way to unite the exiles. I'm proposing a revolution, Alara corrected. The Concorde has been using Deathworlds as garbage dumps for people they consider problems. Scientists who questioned their methods, officers who reported corruption, citizens who demanded rights. They never imagined we could not only survive, but thrive and organize. She brought up a new display showing a timeline. Phase 1. We build our ships and locate other exile colonies. Phase 2. We rescue other exiles across conquered space. Phase 3. We reveal ourselves and demand recognition. The council room erupted in debate. Some worried about the risks, others about whether they had the right to bring other exiles into their plan. The discussion continued for hours until Torres finally raised his hand for silence. This is a big decision, he said carefully. We need to put it to a vote of all settlement members. 2 days later, after every adult in the settlement had a chance to review the proposal, they gathered for the vote. The result was overwhelmingly in favor of Alara's plan. Construction of the first bioorganic ship began immediately. Using the engine's knowledge, they grew rather than built the vessel, cultivating it from modified local organisms. The ship took shape in a hidden valley, its hull developing a tough outer layer that could withstand both the atmospheric toxins of Tartarus 9 and the vacuum of space. After 3 months of work, the ship was ready. It resembled nothing the Concorde had ever created, more like a living creature than a mechanical vessel. Its skin changed colors to blend with its surroundings, and it could absorb energy directly from stellar radiation. Inside, the corridors were grown from living tissue that maintained life support naturally. She's beautiful, Torres said as they prepared for the first test flight. What are we calling her? Alara smiled. Tuesday. Torres raised an eyebrow and she explained. Because for humans, even the impossible is just another Tuesday. The crew, for the first mission, consisted of Alara, Torres, and 4 others who had shown the strongest adaptations to Tartarus 9's environment. Their mission was to travel to Hellfire 4, another death world where the Concorde had been sending exiles for over 50 years. As the Tuesday lifted off, the entire settlement watched from safe distances. The ship rose smoothly, its biological systems adapting instantly to the changing pressure and chemical composition of the atmosphere. Within minutes, it had broken through to space, completely undetected by the Concorde's distant monitoring satellites. Course set for Hellfire 4, Torres announced from the navigation position. Estimated travel time 6 days. Alara gazed out at the stars, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced since before her exile. The Conquered thinks they've thrown us away and forgotten us. They're about to learn that was their biggest mistake. The Galactic Conquered first realized something was happening when a prison transport to Brimstone 7, a volcanic Deathworld, disappeared before arrival. The incident was written off as a navigation error until a second transport to Frost 12 and Ice Deathworld also vanished. When they sent investigators, they found nothing but empty drop pods and a symbol burned into the ground. Earth's continents surrounded by a circle of stars. Reports began flooding in from across conquered space. Exile drops to various Deathworlds all ended the same way. Empty pods, no bodies, and the same mysterious symbol. High Counselor Vextara called an emergency meeting of the Security Council. "Someone is intercepting our exile transports," he announced, grimly. "We have no idea who or how." The Zephyrian counselor shuffled nervously. "Could it be survivors from the Deathworlds?" The suggestion was met with dismissive laughter. "Impossible," said Vextara. "Nothing survives on those planets longer than a few weeks, especially not soft species like humans." At that moment, alarms blared throughout the Conquered outpost on Nexus Station, a remote monitoring facility near the edge of Conquered space. Security feeds showed an impossible vessel of organic technology docking without authorization. The ship had appeared from nowhere, undetected by any sensors until it was already attached to the station. The security feeds showed humans walking unprotected through decontamination chambers filled with radiation levels that should be lethal. Their skin glowed slightly, and their eyes had adapted to see wavelengths no human should perceive. "We bring a message from Tartarus," they announced to the terrified station commander as they strode onto the command deck. "Exiles no longer." As the footage reached the Conquered Council, Vexitara watched in stunned silence. The human leading the group looked familiar. It took him a moment to place her. Dr. Alara Reed, the troublemaker they had exiled to Tartarus 9 just 6 months ago. She looked directly into the camera, somehow knowing the council would see this footage. "You sent us to die," she said calmly. "Instead we evolved. Now we're coming home. All of us. And things are going to change." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. "Impossible," whispered Vextara, but there was fear in his voice now. No species could survive those conditions, let alone thrive and develop new technology. The Zephyrian counselor seemed less surprised. "I warned you," he said softly. "Humans have that disturbing tendency to adapt." The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concord was in chaos. Representatives from 100 worlds talked over each other as reports continued to stream in from across the galaxy. In the 3 months since the appearance of the exile ships, the situation had escalated beyond anything the Concord had ever faced. High Counselor Vextara struck his ceremonial staff against the floor, calling for order. "We must respond with force. These escaped exiles have seized control of 12 monitoring stations and disabled defense systems on 3 border worlds. Our military vessels can't even detect their ships until they're already docked," countered the Zephyrian counselor. "How do you propose we fight what we cannot see?" The emergency session had been running for 6 hours when the chamber's main doors unexpectedly slid open. The room fell silent as a group of figures entered, humans and other species, all bearing the subtle signs of Deathworld adaptation. The security guards moved to intercept them but froze in place when the newcomers raised their hands, emanating an energy field that paralyzed conventional weapons. At the front of the group walked Dr. Alara Reed. She had changed dramatically since her exile. Her skin now showed distinct luminescent patterns that shifted with her moods. Her movements were fluid and powerful, adapted to far harsher gravity than the chamber's standard setting. Most striking were her eyes, which gleamed with an inner light that spoke of knowledge beyond normal human understanding. Behind her stood Commander Torres and representatives from each of the 12 Deathworlds they had liberated, humans and non-humans alike who had been changed by their environments. Each bore unique adaptations, heightened senses, enhanced strength, biological defenses against toxins and radiation. "You sentenced us to die on worlds you feared to even orbit," Ilara addressed the stunned council. Instead, we learned, adapted, and evolved. The precursors who built the evolution engines chose us as their inheritors because we do what you cannot. We thrive on adversity. Vextara found his voice first. This is an outrage. Guards, remove these criminals. Alara smiled as the guards found themselves unable to move. Your technology doesn't work on us anymore, Counselor. We've moved beyond it. She placed a data crystal on the council table. The device activated itself, projecting a holographic map of the galaxy with 12 points brightly marked. This contains coordinates to all 12 evolution engines scattered throughout the galaxy, one on each major death world. We control them all now. The council erupted in panic, but fell silent when Torres entered with a contingent of evolved humans, whose adaptations were even more pronounced than Ilara's. What do you want? Asked the crystalline counselor, his voice trembling slightly. Revenge? To destroy the conquered? We're not here for revenge, Ilara replied, her voice calm and measured. We're here to take our place at this table. The conquered has excluded adaptive species for too long, fearing what you don't understand. That ends today. She gestured to the diverse group behind her. We represent the Deathworlders Alliance, survivors from Earth and 11 other harsh planets. We're not asking for admission to your Concord. We're offering you the chance to join, a new one. The chamber doors opened again, and diplomatic representatives from dozens of worlds entered, allies the exiles had made during their 3-month campaign across conquered space. Species who had long chafed under the Concord's restrictive policies saw an opportunity for change. Half of your member worlds have already recognized our alliance, Torres stated. They've seen what the precursor technology can offer. Clean energy, advanced medicine, sustainable terraforming, benefits the Concord has promised for centuries but never delivered. Vexitera stood up, his pride wounded. You expect us to simply surrender authority to a band of exiles? The Concord has ruled for 10,000 years, and grown stagnant in that time, Ilara countered. You've been so focused on maintaining stability that you've forgotten how to progress. The precursors understood that true advancement comes through challenge, not comfort. She stepped closer to the council table. We don't want to destroy the Concord. We want to transform it into something better. A union where adaptability is valued, where different evolutionary paths are respected rather than feared. The Zephyrian counselor studied Ilara closely. And if we refuse? Then we'll continue as we have been, she replied simply, offering our technology and alliance to individual worlds until the Concord becomes irrelevant. But there would be much suffering in that path. Change is always painful when resisted. A tense silence filled the chamber as the council members exchanged glances. Finally, the eldest among them, the Aquilian representative who had been silent until now, spoke up. 10,000 years ago, my species joined the original Concord because it offered us protection and stability in a chaotic galaxy. Perhaps it is time for the next evolution of that vision. He turned to his colleagues. I move that we recognize the Deathworlders Alliance and begin negotiation for integration. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Galactic Concord, faced with technology they could not match and adaptability they could not counter, voted to accept the Deathworlders Alliance as full members, the first fundamental change to galactic governance in 10,000 years. 6. Months later, Ilara stood on the observation deck of the new council headquarters looking out at the stars. The massive station orbited Earth, a symbolic location for the headquarters of what was now called the Adaptive Concord. Torres joined her at the viewport. The terraforming of Tartarus 9 is proceeding ahead of schedule. In a few years, it will be as habitable as Earth, though some of our people want to keep a few areas challenging for training purposes. Ilara smiled. Of course they do. Humans never change in some ways. Speaking of change, Torres continued, the latest reports show 17 more species developing early adaptations from controlled exposure to engine technology. The medical benefits alone have revolutionized healthcare across the galaxy. And the other projects? The expedition to the Galactic core leaves next month. With our new ships, we can explore regions the old Concord never dreamed of reaching. and the research team believes they've located 3 more evolution engines beyond conquered space, exactly where the precursor data suggested they'd be. Ilara nodded with satisfaction. In less than a year, everything had changed. Species that had been stuck in comfortable stagnation for millennia were beginning to adapt and grow again. The knowledge of the precursors was being carefully shared, advancing science and medicine across thousands of worlds. Most importantly, no one was being exiled to die anymore. The Deathworlds had become training centers where volunteers could safely experience controlled challenges, developing adaptations that were then studied and understood. A young diplomatic aide approached, somewhat intimidated by Ilara's presence. "Counselor Reed, the Regellian delegation has arrived. They're requesting your presence at the welcome ceremony." "Thank you. I'll be right there." As the aide left, Ilara turned back to Torres with a smile. "Counselor Reed, still feels strange." "No. Stranger than commanding a bioorganic ship grown from Deathworld flora," he replied with a laugh. "But that's the human way, isn't it? Adapt and move forward." As they walked toward the ceremonial hall, they passed a large mural depicting Earth and the 12 Deathworlds, surrounded by a circle of stars, the symbol of the adaptive conquered. Beneath it was inscribed the motto that had spread across the galaxy: "What's a Deathworld to a human but a place to call home?" The conquered had given Ilara a death sentence on a world that should have killed her within days. Instead, it had given her, and humanity, the stars. Just another Tuesday for a human, the end.